This video is brought to you by Law Excellence IAS Academy.
Dear students, good morning. Welcome to Deep of Law Excellence R&D. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 9th August 2019. The first article for discussion, A Leaf Out of the Chinese Playbook. In this, the author is trying to argue that there are many parallels which are coming between India and China with regard to their treatment to minorities and also treatment to dissent. India is historically a country that is known for its tolerance. In this context, bringing parallels with China and India learning from some high handedness of China is a kind of derogatory. So let us put it in perspective. In China, Huns are the majority. In India, Hindus are majority. Muslims, Christians, Jains, Buddhists, these are all minorities in India. In China, Buddhists and then Muslims, Buddhists in Tibet, Muslims in Xinjiang province, these are the minorities. So here, there is an unrest in Tibet and Xinjiang province there. An element of unrest we can see in Jammu and Kashmir and northeastern India. The way they approached their problems historically are very different. India has understood the diversity and it tried to accommodate the needs of the diversity. That's why in the constitution there are many special provisions which are made, and these special provisions have come into existence through kind of negotiation, discussion, debate, contestation, etc. So the India's nature of accommodation of different viewpoints is known across the world. When India became independent, what the people thought about is this country cannot survive. This nation cannot survive. The reason was simple. Because of these many diversities, Europeans never experienced stability. So, one thing which has to be stated is plural culture of India and then civilizational strength of India. These are the reasons why India survived as a nation. The foundation for this civilizational strength is tolerance. Today, India is more a civilizational entity rather than a territorial entity. And the second thing is, India cannot be defined by its geography, religions, etc. The idea of India is defined. The idea of India is diversity, idea of India is tolerance, idea of India is accommodation. So, let's make small comparison between India and China over here. So in China, there is unrest in the Xinjiang province. And many of the Huns majority, they believe that government is trying to appease Xinjiang province Muslims. And also, Tibet is seen as an extension of China. So in India too, the military force has shut down the voice of the people of the Kashmir before Article 370 is being done away with. And added to that, there is also a dissent in the northeast which is crushed with police force. And the second, unluckily, and these fringes, either it is in India and China, these are the minorities who are living over there. So, India appears to be learning something from its northern neighbor, and muscularity in the Indian context is not welcomable. That is what this article says. The next part is much ado about little. Why so much of hullabulla on Article 370? Because Article 370 already has been diluted. Article 370, when it was made, the subjects which were given to center are only three. And over years, almost two-thirds of the constitution and many of the parliamentary laws, these were extended to Kashmir through presidential orders. During the times of the Nehruvian dates itself, the extension of Indian constitution and parliamentary authority and institutions of center as made. So Mr. Sheikh Abdullah, the friend of Nehru, was kept in prison as he has harbored the intentions of secessionism. And in 1975, he has to accept this compromised truncated autonomy to the Kashmir. And Indira Gandhi has house arrested him and kept him in Kodaikanal in Tamil Nadu. So today Article 370 is just a facade of autonomy for Jammu and Kashmir. So removal of the Article 370 will not make much difference to Jammu and Kashmir. And the second thing is Article 35A, that can make some difference. Why? So the demographic change can happen with regard to Kashmiris. So when this demographic change happens, obviously the voice of the Kashmiris as unique entity and protection of their culture values may get diluted. And third, damage can happen for the Kashmir due to the dilution or downgrading of it from state to union territory. because the full democratic participation of the citizens is not possible in the union territory. An appointed authority such as lieutenant governor is going to govern the state. So the sentiments of the Kashmiris are hurt, more of downgrading. And this downgrading is not in the interest of the democracy and not in the interest of the people out over there. So, if there is a local representation, local chief minister is making the decisions rather than someone is airdropped from Delhi, then people participation is expected to increase and democratic space is expected to grow up. And added to think, the failure of the democracy is the reason for the trouble in Kashmir now. If you remember in 1987 elections, there was a party called Muslim United Front. Most of the people who are part of Hurriyat conference or who are demanding for separate Kashmir, all these people are one who contested the elections on behalf of Muslim United Front. But what happened? The elections were rigged and then the democracy was raped. Because of this, as democracy was not given due time and space to get settled, we are facing this problem in the Kashmir today. Now, what about the sympathy of the Muslims from other part of India towards Kashmiris? Somehow there is a huge distance between Kashmiri Muslims and Muslims from other part of India. Now, they neither sympathize with each other. Why this cultural difference has come up, it is unknown. So this is what we need to know over here. The next part is knee-jerk reaction. Kashmir, after India making certain decisions on Article 370-35A autonomy of the Kashmir and converting it into a union territory, Pakistan started taking certain knee-jerk reaction. The tragedy is Pakistan never recognized the importance of the Article 370 and it always ridiculed the Article 370 and autonomy of the Kashmir. It alleged that Kashmir is under the forceful occupation of the India. Today, when Article 370 was removed, it started crying on it. So it is more psychophancy rather than reality. And it wants to get more and more international attention to the Kashmir issue. Obviously, no country is going to involve now. India's muscular power, especially economic muscle, is much higher. And the countries want to have better relations with India than Pakistan. And Pakistan is known for itself to be harboring terrorists. Then international attention, other than an Organization for Islamic Conference, OIC, and certain friendly nations like Turkey, Pakistan is not expected to have a greater attention on the Kashmir issue. And United States of America is bound to declare it as a bilateral issue, and it may try to take the matter to the United Nations. Even in the United Nations, it may be declared as a bilateral issues to be solved. So, and the next is cycle of extremes. See, in summer we see severe water crisis in India. So Chennai went through a severe water crisis. Now when it comes to rainy season, Mumbai is flooding, and then Karnataka is flooding, Kerala is flooding. So one way we are seeing the drought in the particular year, and the other way we are seeing cyclone and floods. This shows the clear mismanagement of the water. In this context, there has to be certain mechanisms in place towards the water management. So, encroachment of the floodplains or illegal occupation of the banks of the rivers, all these have to be strictly dealt with. And the second is abdication of responsibility has to be punished for. National Disaster Management Authority has given certain guidelines with regard to urban flooding recently. These have to be taken seriously. So, death and destruction are decreased, but economic destruction, loss of the states and the regions because of these disasters is increasing dramatically. With climate change, it is bound to increase further. Every state, every region, every local government has to develop certain protocol to save the water and to use it when the seasons are changing. So let us develop this resilience to handle the disasters. That is what this article talks about. The most important article today, it is about medical commission bill. We need to accept certain facts about healthcare situation in this country. One is, there is a lot of rural-urban divide. Allopathic doctors do not want to go to rural areas and practice there. Is that mean? Do we need to deprive them of the necessary quality healthcare? And the second, the regionally, north is deprived of doctors more than the south. So, most of the doctors in India are getting located in the urban areas. And the patient-wise, if you see, the perceptions of the patients are changing. They want to go for a specialist doctor rather than being treated by a generalist doctor. In this context, the National Medical Commission has proposed that to address the problem of the human resources in the healthcare sector, we have to provide for 6 months of gap training to the nurse practitioners. In US, we have these nurse practitioners. And also, we have to train these Ayush workers to be posted in primary healthcare centers. These has to be called as community healthcare practitioners. So then, what is the problem of the allopathic doctors? They say that the quacks are going or will be promoted. So I have two problems over here. You don't go there and you don't allow others to go there. So why can't you go there and practice and provide for the quality healthcare services? In this context, there is a problem. So in the medical colleges which are based on the Western model, the primary health and public health, these are never been given for focus. So, most of the doctors have their focus on super specialization. So, in this context, the curriculum of the medicine itself has to be changed with greater focus towards the community and public health. And the second part, if forced job in the primary healthcare centers did not become successful. So previously it was stated that any person who completed his medicine has to do 2 years of service in the rural area. It did not become successful. It did not give expected results. So one thing, the healthcare situation has to be changed. Status quo is no more welcome in the healthcare situation in India. So what we have to do in this context, human resources system has to be addressed. So there is an important solution which is there in the Chhattisgarh and Assam. So they have brought in a 3 year course which is called licensed medical practitioners. So this 3 year course has remarkably improved the situation of the rural healthcare in Chhattisgarh and Assam. And we have a remarkable example from China that is called barefoot doctors. And the people, the laymen are being trained. Now, if you are converting the Ayush doctors to allopathy, what is the purpose of their training in the Ayush? It means that is becoming useless. So rather than that, let them continue in their career and let us create a new a stream of health practitioners who are called licensed medical practitioners with some 3 years of course. Let us provide them the treatment of the basic disease, at least identification of a disease so that they can be referred to the right hospital. That way we can improve the quality services. For one thing is clear, status quo is not possible. Now, nurse medical practitioners etc with 6 months of course 6 months of some training etc, nothing is going to change on the ground. Instead of that, the best practice is to start this licensed medical practitioners in India. The next article, economic milestone and a poignant anniversary. This is about the nationalization of banks in India. And when Indira Gandhi government took this decision in 1969, then in 1980, it was also politically right and economically right then. The private sector banks did not provide for the necessary capital and necessary wealth required for the expansion of the agriculture. The rural banking was struggling. And in this case, any expansion of this banking and banking sector coming in the welfare activities etc will not do good for the financial intermediation in the country. That is what is the argument. So in this, money lenders and then middlemen, traders, these have dominated the entire credit operations onto the rural side. So nationalization of banks has taken up a multi-agency approach to extend the services of the public sector banks into the rural areas. Bank branches were created. For every one urban bank, 4 rural banks have to exist. Lead bank scheme has come up, and one of the bank will be set as a lead bank which has to create the pace setter. And then priority sector lending. It means out of total lending by a particular bank, 40% has to be set aside for the priority sector, small scale industries, and then loans to the marginalized sections, agriculture. These all been defined as the priority sector lending. Rural banks, regional rural banks, NABARD, cooperative banks, all these have this multi-agency approach has improved the bank access in the rural areas. Later, Narsimham Committee has recommended that the banks have to be free with regard to their operations. The constraints on the banking sector has to be reduced. In this context, the closing down of the banks have started. And second, the priority sector lending is liberalized. The more corporates in the name of agri-business, they are able to take the loans. So this has been counted as a priority sector lending to the agriculture. So in that way, the financial inclusion and credit growth in the rural side has decreased. And then from 2004 onwards, the system started changing. Again, RBI has noticed that the banking channels in the rural areas are coming down. Any branch expansion, RBI is carefully considering that and stating that 25% of the bank branches shall be onto the rural side now. Now, what is the problem here? Whenever money supply has to be increased in the market, the government can increase that through fiscal policy. But government is worried about the fiscal deficit and it wants the banks to provide for the liberal loans. When these liberal loans, which are risky, which are being provided to the customers, the NPS of the banks are increasing. So when government is not taking the responsibility, it wants to rise up the economy, induce the economy, incentivize the economy through the banks. So in such a situation, obviously the banks are at risk. And today, with the same risk, with the same fiscal risk, the government do not want to recapitalize the bank, or it is very stingy in recapitalizing the banks. In this situation, the banks NPAs have increased. And what is the solution which has been suggested? Privatization. Privatization never helped in India with regard to the banking sector for financial inclusion, for expansion of the credit to the rural India. So, if financial inclusion as a way out of fighting poverty has to be achieved, it can be achieved through public sector. When there was 2008 economic crisis, it was the public sector banks that have saved India. That is what is the author wants to say in this particular article. Thank you very much. Have a good day. All the best.